Death Watch.
Okay, welcome back to Death Watch's Call of Cthulhu Campaign. I am Travis, and I will be your guys' keeper tonight. Last we left off, you were standing before an enormous amount of wealth, and before a somewhat unsettling bas-relief carved in an obsidian-like stone that was set into the southern wall of the room that you guys are in. But before we get back to it, let's get some introduction from our players, starting with you, Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm playing Charles Stanton, the group's guide for this unfortunate expedition.
Hi, I'm Brandon. I'm playing Wallace Andrews, the group's doctor, who's already been put to work quite often since he joined this expedition.
This is Justin Argo. I'm playing Lance Monroe, who has received much of that medical attention, is now a hobbled archaeologist and occult expert.
I'm John. I'm playing James Whitmire, the smuggler extraordinaire.
All right. So as I said, you guys stand before this heaping piles of gold and artifacts, and you're looking at this bas-relief last time we left off. And as you guys had noted upon entry, you thought it was obsidian, but as you guys have longer to look at it, you realize there are parts of the carving that are clear like crystal, and they seem to spring to motion when you guys move your lantern and your light plays in the prisms. You realize that this motion is probably just like an optical illusion, but regardless, the whole image itself unnerves you. So let's start with a sanity roll from each of you.
Congratulations, Charles.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is nice.
You really needed that, though.
Apparently it doesn't unnerve you, but you can see how it would be unsettling to others of less mental fortitude. So, in particular, the fourth carving, we'll say as Mr. Monroe, you hold your lantern up to get a better look at the detail. You see that a star pattern in the sky of the fourth carving sort of blooms in the light of your lantern. All those crystal prisms set into the black stone come alight. And also of note, as you take in the other details of the room, is how the great stone blocks that make up the construction of this part of the pyramid show incredible age, with limestone deposits on the walls and stalactites on the ceiling, which in itself is an odd juxtaposition from the cool and arid climate outside the pyramid. You guys, or Monroe, you know that limestone and stalactites, they form with moisture. So you're not quite sure how that's happening down here. In any case, the bas-relief, carved in some singular substance whose nearest resemblance is obsidian, seems not to show any sign of the passing of years. So this is going to be our first opportunity for a Cthulhu Mythos roll. For those of you that have any skill in it, you can go ahead and throw that out there now. Is it just Lance?
Yeah, I think I'm the only one that's actually had. Although, no, James should have it too after his encounter with the entity as well.
I didn't get anything like that. Was I supposed to?
It's because you succeeded on your sanity roll that time.
Okay.
But I believed you had 1%.
I have a 0 right now. Should it be 1%?
No, maybe not. You guys had the opportunity to read certain files stored at the Society for the Exploration of the Unexplained, if you guys were a part of that. And I thought that you had been a part of that, but maybe that was...
Oh, I don't think that I had changed it. I didn't know we were supposed to change anything for it. That was about our previous adventures, right?
Yeah, so if you are a member of that, then you have 1% in it.
No, I did not make it.
Okay. So, Mr. Monroe, you had also made an occult roll that, for some reason, the view of the serpent-like man in these carvings reminded you of stories about Atlantis and how the initial rulers were supposed to be serpent men and that they enslaved humans at one point. but that's the limit of what the occult knowledge gave you. In any case, you stand there amongst the wealth, and what would you guys like to do?
So there's a ton of gold, and are there other artifacts around as well?
Yes.
All right, I'll start picking my way through that stuff. I do want to take some of the gold, but if I see artifacts, I'd like to check those out too.
Okay, so yeah, you guys see, everything from gold coins to little gold statuettes or bracelets or other jewelry. And you begin to see why it was that Augustus Larkin had those two artifacts he claimed was from this site were of, two different time periods. Because that's exactly what's going on in this room, is they range all the way from pre-Incan to modern wealth.
I'm going to stick to, as much as I can, some of the older stuff.
Okay, yeah, if you are, scooping this stuff up and starting to put it into your pack or your pockets or anything, like you don't even really make a dent in the amount that's here with what you're able to put in your pockets. Let's see what Lance is thinking about at this time.
I'm going to be focusing on this relief, kind of going over it in detail. It'll take a little while before I'm kind of satisfied with my observations of that before I start looking at the treasure.
Okay. Well, nothing new springs out to you, although you can see that these carvings clearly depict a narrative in each of the panels. As to the conclusions that Lance draws from that narrative, I'm not sure. What does Lance think about that?
It does kind of reinforce the idea of a pre-culture like Laramie or something similar that ties Atlantis to this area in this region.
And what is Dr. Andrews thinking of all of this?
Well, like Lance, he's much more intrigued by that carving, though he doesn't understand why. So I would move up to Lance and ask him if he understands what it means as I study it next to him.
So I'm going to pass my lantern on to him and pull out my sketch pad and start trying to sketch this out as best I can. And while I do, I'm going to narrate, the legends and the myths of how, say something along the lines of, well, good doctor, there have been long speculations that before humans really took precedence upon the earth, that there was another race of these serpent bird-like creature things that had captivated us and used us as slaves and laborers until in some unknown fashion we escaped from it. And it appears that this is some carving depicting something similar to that.
All right, so I've never heard anything like that before, so I'll just accept what he says and keep holding the lantern for him.
But I'll be mentioning that carving like this shouldn't even exist in this part of the world. If anything, the rumors and the myths come from more of a Mediterranean region where it was thought to be that was the source of Atlantis and one of the myths around the Atlanteans. But this is thousands of miles away from where it should be.
And Keeper, you said that there was one part of it that was made out of crystal, but not the rest of it. Is that what you said?
Well, as I had mentioned, it looks closest to obsidian, although it's at points, it seems more crystal in nature, as there are prisms at certain points in how it's carved that pick up the light and give this impression of impending motion. So if you want an example, you can think about those cheesy hologram cards you would get in I don't know, some random tradable card game where if you moved it in the one way you would see a certain picture, and if you moved it another it would be something else. So it's a similar effect as that, but it's changing based on the position of the lanterns in the room.
I've never seen anything like that before, have I?
No. As I had mentioned, the art as far as the depictions of the humans and this snake-headed figure, they're not photorealistic. They're still more representative. So as far as the detail, you've seen sketches that have higher amounts of detail than these carvings, but this goes beyond the technique. You can't even imagine how one would do this, chiseling out of any known stone. And what is Mr. Stanton thinking at this moment?
Let's see. He's probably kind of nervously, like gnawing on the end of one of his cigars and eyeing those bedrolls because you said that they appear to be more modern, right?
Yeah, they're made of reeds, so they're not. Whoever put them here brought the reeds with them because there's really no place nearby to get the reeds.
Okay, so not as modern, perhaps as I was thinking.
And they, if considering that's the age of this site or the purported age, if those were here originally, they would have been long turned to dust.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
Go for it.
I was going to say, do we see any signs of like footprints in dust, anything like that, of anybody else passing through here?
Yeah, a little bit. Not many. Most recently, you can pick out one was in this room. And if you guys remember last time, behind you, as you guys are piled up at the entrance of this room, you were in this sort of T intersection, and that part has collapsed, and you saw the hand of what you presume to be a Kari Siri sticking out from all the rubble, and it was still, either a nervous reflex or it was still alive.
Oh, I guess I'll say that, let's see, perhaps some of Mr. Larkin's other expeditions into here and kind of tow at one of the bedrolls or the pallet.
So, Mr. Monroe, you, with your archaeological background, you can guess that the purpose of this room originally was a work room. And you don't get that from any sort of details in the room, just your relative understanding of where it is to the pyramid proper. You think that the main portion of the pyramid would be off to the west.
Did we see any tunnels that headed in that direction? It sounded like we came down from above, and then there was a T section with one side collapsed, and the other side went here.
Yes, it appears the collapsed portion would be the tunnels that led towards the pyramid, or, more towards the center of the pyramid.
Okay. I'll still be kind of analyzing or trying to get a decent sketch of the relief, but I'll kind of mention that over my shoulder when Charles makes his comment that the collapse may have cut this section off from the main part of the pyramid.
We'll probably have to peel off another one of the caps.
Yeah, we'll probably have to look somewhere. This is probably the that one section where we first dynamited.
It is.
Mr. Monroe, go ahead and give me that sketch roll.
I tried.
Looks like your sketching is pretty sketchy.
So
that would be a no.
That's not a fumble. So what I was looking for is that you capture some element of, detail that would affect people when they look at it. In this particular case, since you're not really rushed, you can get the gist of it. It won't do anything other than serve as a reminder or a point of interest as to what was found down here.
Okay. Yeah, sketching isn't my strong suit.
All right, so what is your guys' next move?
Well, probably to climb on up and reseal this vent and open up another one. Maybe break for lunch.
I'm going to ask if I can stay behind. Maybe we can take some of this up. I'm sure that our benefactor would like to have some of this returned with us, and I would like to have the chance to take a look at some of the artifacts in here. This is a treasure trove it's a time capsule that goes back thousands of years that we may never have a chance to see again.
I agree with you. All right. We'll start some sort of, what is it? I want to say like a water bucket brigade type thing, except with treasure. But I can't think of the word.
Okay, yeah. No, that definitely be possible. So at this stage, I think Monroe, as mentioned, he wants to stay down here and I guess examine the artifacts. So then, who else or which of you are going to be down here? I think we'd need 2 more people down here to get that idea of yours working there, Stanton.
All right.
Well, I'll stay down here.
Okay. And then, was it, you said 2 more? So I guess the smuggler.
So James, Mr. Monroe, and Andrews will be down here. And then another person. Are you guys going to use the chimney you came down to start moving this stuff out?
Is the chimney that was close to this collapse still open?
Yes, it's still open.
Maybe we should get our gold bucket brigade going up that one. Would we still need 3 people to do it?
No, you could just leave 2 down here if that were the case.
And then probably one at the top to haul it.
It's also further away from the camp, though.
And you would have to reposition your ropes, but either one is fine. It's up to whoever.
It would be quicker to haul it out rather than having people moving through these tunnels, and then potentially just haul them out of that one as well. We should be able to easily transport this a lot faster above ground over to our camp than underground.
Well, I assume as this occurs, like in character, James would have started, or not James, sorry, Mr. Stanton would have started talking about his idea and assigning people where they were to go. And then, James, you offer your alternative idea, so I suppose it falls to Mr. Stanton again to either accept it or stick with his original idea.
How much time, Travis, do you think it would take us to reposition the ropes and all that stuff?
Not long, because you could just send one person up that, or 1 or 2 people up the way you guys came down and take the ropes up with you and then move over to the other chimney. So
All right.
in less than an hour, you could have it arranged.
All right, then. Mr. Whitmire, with me. We're going up the vent and coming down the other one.
I'll nod and heft my stuffed pack and head following.
At that, I would like to raise a comment and say, no offense, Mr. Stanton, but I would prefer if you and your rifle were to stay down here with us, just on the off chance that something were to happen. You have 2 men up above with weapons, but if you and Mr. Whitmire leave, then I'm afraid we are at a disadvantage.
I have a rifle.
Yes, but I would prefer to have 2 if the situation calls for it.
I could reposition the ropes with the help of Roy and Marco.
Don't forget you also have Jackson Elias down here with you. And while he doesn't have a rifle, he will offer the services of his 45.
Well, perhaps you and Mr. Jackson will go about repositioning the ropes.
Okay. I could take him and we can reposition him.
Okay. So you guys set about the work. You move your ropes over to the other chimney, and it all goes off without a hitch. So will you be taking your lunch before you start the process of moving this stuff out?
Yeah, if you guys want, we could haul you up this chimney so you can eat some lunch outside before getting to work.
Well, I think now that we've changed it, that it's probably going to be a dinner or a supper or whatever for Mr. Stanton. I think you would prefer to just get this done with.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's just get the work done.
Pass some sandwiches down or something and eat while you're working if you want.
I don't think I would even notice food if it were put in front of my face. I mean, this is an epic find.
Okay, so, foregoing any formal meal, of course, you guys probably all carry, little bits of food on you for snacking, but you set about moving this gold from the room up the chimney and back to the camp. And you can get a sense, whoever's dealing with the room, I suppose that's Mr. Monroe and Andrews, that as you start to move this gold out, the stuff that's closest to you guys is the newest. And as you get further back towards the wall is when you start getting more of the ancient artifacts.
So are we trying to move everything out of here, or are we picking and choosing as we go?
I believe
I would have thought that we would have done probably the oldest stuff, but probably not modern. I don't really see where he would be interested in in modern stuff like this.
Well,
Well,
you,
But I'm not the expert on that either, so I'm just here to ship it.
well, you're the sorter, I believe, Mr. Monroe. So that's up to you.
I'd probably be focusing on artifacts and things that really kind of exemplify what all is contained here. So try and get as wide. I don't like I was asking. Are we trying to take everything with us, or are we just picking?
Well, you.
I don't think we would be able to transport everything in one trip.
Yeah, Mr. Whitmire is correct. There's more gold than you have people or mules to carry out of here.
Okay, then I'll focus on the older stuff and try and get some representation from all of the time periods, just so that I can show the vast array.
Yeah, so you can see that the biggest, as you're kind of digging through this and selecting the artifacts that you like, the biggest cache appears, by your estimation, to be of Incan design. And that goes along with the idea that this site might have been used also to hide gold from the conquistadors.
Well, we know at least one conquistador found it.
Right, at least according to Luis de Mendoza's story.
All right. Yeah, I'll go through and try and find some good artifacts that are more than just valuable for the sake of the amount of gold that's in them, but also relics that show good depictions of whatever the civilizations were in the different time periods. Trying to keep an eye out for any ACLO symbols in particular, or symbols that would have been from a pre-Incan society.
Okay. While it is somewhat disappointing that you do not find anything that looks like that has the ACLO writing on it, or anything that's like the wall carvings, it's still very exciting to have this amount of Incan and pre-Incan artifacts. And you have everything from depictions of the staff god to, other lesser deities in their pantheon. And so what I'm kind of curious is, in this whole chain, is everybody fairly honest about, how stuff transports up there? Is anybody pocketing anything, or?
I've already gotten the fill of my own personal stuff in my bag.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't know what was the deal. That was there any sort of split of treasure? I didn't ask those questions when I joined the expedition because I didn't know we would be finding any.
Seeing as the amount, I mean, other than what we determine goes back to Mr. Merriweather, I would assume that it's take what you would like, but not out of what we're choosing for Mr. Merriweather.
Yeah, like Charles would probably have said similar, and then probably also a warning about not wanting to weigh yourself down too much, but that'd be about the limit of the how we're divvying stuff up. Take what you can carry.
Yeah, and you should be able to use to pile quite a lot of it on one of the mules, as your food has started to deplete on that one as well. So yeah, that was the setup with Larkin. It was just this, because in lieu of payment for joining the expedition, it was the prospect of, either physical riches like what you found here, or, if you're more academic type, you can write a paper on the expedition, and that becomes of interest, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Plus
well, if
the
that's
celebrity
the case,
of having found all this stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll take a bunch then too, if that's the case. I'll fill my pockets.
Okay.
And I'll keep an eye out for a few more interesting looking pieces that would go well in my museum.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to add that Charles probably isn't filling his pockets yet. He's going to wait till he's up top and then probably put some into one of his clothes chests or something.
Okay, yeah, Mr. Monroe, you find an interesting depiction of the staff god. But this one is somewhat, he's fanged, not necessarily evil looking, but you just haven't seen too many fanged depictions of the staff god.
Okay. And if I see any like little statues or other things like that, I'll also. I'm looking for things about that you could hold in one hand, put on a little pedestal, something along those lines.
Yeah, there are plenty.
Looking for half a dozen or a dozen of them to put in my pack.
All right. So do you guys want to carry on with this task until dinner and bedding down for the night?
Yeah, I would say that would probably give us more than enough out of this room to satisfy Mr. Merriweather's needs, unless we find something else that really stands out further in.
Yeah, by the end of the day, Mr. Stanton, you know that you guys are kind of at the point where you're just sort of piling gold up outside, and you have more than you can physically carry in one trip.
Yeah, maybe tell Mr. Monroe to stop with anything that's more recent. We need older stuff. Merriweather wants old artifacts. And so maybe start dwindling the just trash gold that we're bringing up.
Yeah, I think that's mostly what he had picked out for you. That's what you've seen come up as the older ones.
I thought he said he was having a fairly even representation from the various eras.
I was trying to get at least some representation, but there probably would still be some focus more towards the Incan and pre-Incan.
Okay. So yeah, if we're to the point where it's just kind of piling up and going to waste, and Monroe doesn't seem to think that there's anything more perhaps of interest, I'll call it there and go look over what we got.
Yeah, so you guys all get topside as the day draws to a close, and you're looking at this mound of gold in the dim light of the day. So yeah, as you're looking across at all the men surrounding you, everybody seems to have a contented look on their face, both from the hard work and, the prospect of that much wealth. Nothing unusual jumps out at any of you on the items that made it topside. So I guess you can make your camp, or it's already made, but you can make your dinner. Okay, so yeah, you guys are gathered around your evening meal, which is potatoes, a pepper most of you are not used to eating or seeing, but is quite good, along with some of the meat that Mr. Domingo Cespede's good wife pressed into your possession upon leaving their farm. And as you're sitting around this meal, you're all having your own internal thoughts, but Jackson says, if I weren't such a curious bastard, I'd just take what we have now and leave and call it good.
My good friend, I'd have the same thoughts.
Unfortunately, I don't think any of the artifacts that we drug up would pique Mr. Merriweather's interest, so you get your wish.
So what's on the agenda for tomorrow?
Probably peel off one of the caps near the temple itself, or the pyramid, and see if we can get deeper in.
And as the sun has fully dropped, behind the horizon, and that plateau is plunged into darkness save for the firelight, you guys hear a rock dislodge from the path that leads into the site and go clattering into the ravine below. What do you do?
I'll probably jump up with my gun ready.
Yeah, I'll hop up and grab the rifle that Mr. Stanton is letting me borrow.
Yeah, me too.
I'll probably hobble my way up and threateningly hold my crutch out in front of me.
Yeah, for Marco's part, he also scrambles to grab his rifle, and Ray was still sitting by his machine gun and eating the meal as he could, but he gets on the machine gun, which is pointed at the pyramid, and gives you a look, Mr. Stanton.
I'll nod at him to swing it around.
Okay, so he picks up the machine gun and moves it to the other part of the camp so he can look out at the east towards that path. Now, if I can get a spot hidden roll from each of you.
I'll luck that.
I will too.
Okay, so with luck, it looks like everybody... You see a dim shape just at the very edge of the firelight moving down that path. James, you're the quickest on the draw for anything amongst this group. How do you respond?
So when you say moving down the path, do you mean moving towards us or away from us?
It would be towards you, although the path was, didn't run directly at the site, so it's kind of moving along the shoulder of that mountain. And when I say at the very edge, I mean not many details can be picked out. You just are sure you saw a shape, a deeper shadow on the edge of this mountain.
Could I tell if it was two-legged or four-legged?
You can't tell.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll say, I see something out there moving towards us, and then I'll ready the rifle until it gets a little bit closer.
Okay, so the shape that you all see, this dark blob on the shoulder of the mountain, seems to join with another darker spot on the mountain, and then no motion can be detected. What's your play, Charles?
I'll nod to Mr. Jackson to get a lantern. We're gonna go have a look. Anyone else want to come? You're welcome. If not,
Did we
stay
have
here.
any flares?
You do have flares.
Should we toss one out?
What's the environment like here? Mostly rocky.
Yeah,
Any chance of a fire starting?
possibly, but not up on the mountainside. If
Okay.
it were to fall down into the ravine, there's some, scrub brush down there.
Good thinking, Mr. Whitmire. Give one a toss. But still, I'm going to head out there anyway.
All right. Yeah, I'll grab a flare to light and throw out there on my next opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, well, you can throw it in when Charles and Mr. Elias start to head out on the path or through the gate. And it illuminates the area you guys thought you had seen the shadow, but you don't see a figure. You just see a rather large rock outcropping, but nothing visible at this stage. And Charles and Jackson duck under that gate and get out onto the beginning of the path. At this stage, what do you want to do, Mr. Andrews? Dr. Andrews?
Well, I can still see them?
Yes.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I can still see them. I have my rifle so I can keep them covered, but I'm not going to follow them until I need to move so that I can keep them in my line of sight because I don't want to leave Monroe here by himself.
Okay. Where you thought you saw this shape is at the very edge of this map, so let me ping that for you guys real quick. And it was just some large rock outcropping up there where you last saw it.
Could you ping that one more time? Thank you.
And so, Lance, you will continue to hold your crutch up threateningly.
As if it were a mighty sword, yes.
All right, so with the rest of you watching as Charles and Elias head up this path, suddenly a figure springs from behind that boulder and starts fleeing away. What do you want to do, Charles?
I'm going to take 2 shots at it, I guess.
With the elephant gun. All right, well, taking 2 shots, both shots are at penalty, but the light conditions also make it even more difficult shot, so they'll be at double penalty.
All right. There's our first one, penalty. So 2?
Yeah.
I said 2. It didn't seem to want to give me 2.
Just click the penalty one again. It's bribery.
Does it give you the highest of the 2?
It might.
Yeah, that's probably what it does. Let's look.
Would that still be a success for you?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, so it gave you. It looks like it rolled an 8 and a 6 with a -1. That's how they do the 10s in this. All right, so yeah, so you still got a hit there.
All right, second shot.
Dang.
Do you still want me to put the number of penalty in as 2, or do you want me to do it 2 separate times?
Put the number in as 2. It worked. It just doesn't do it twice for us.
All right, so 2 hits. I really wish I had gotten those extremes. Combat. I don't think this does the damage, right? So I'm going to have to do that myself.
Yes.
Yep.
2d6. So, no, 3d6. Plus 4. So there's shot 1 and shot 2.
Oh man.
You're like a naval battleship.
All right, yeah. So these two loud reports from his elephant gun ring out and echo across the plateau and down the ravines. And your first shot, it seems to hit your target. It's tough to pick out the type of damage that was done, but you correct for your target starting to go down with that second shot. And I mean, if it's not dead, then
I need a bigger gun.
Right. But at this stage, we could move a little bit more freely. So, what do you want to do?
Yeah, I'll reload and continue my way up towards where it is, and have Jackson shine that light.
Okay.
Hope I didn't shoot a kid or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. A teenage boy.
Yeah.
Although difficult. No, his face is still intact. But I mean, you have done some horrible damage to his body. A big gaping wound in his chest, where your slug exited out. And the other one.
The farmer's boy.
You don't recognize him, Charles. When Jackson gets up, and he has his light looking over him, he's like, "When we saw this boy in Puno, he was following us, Mr. Monroe and I."
Well, looks like he shouldn't have kept up. I'm going to pick up the body, or drag it, I guess, or I don't know how to do that.
Just drag him onto the flare.
No, I'm going to drag him back down to camp.
Okay, so the rest of you guys watch as Charles and Jackson come back, and Charles is dragging a corpse. And Mr. Monroe, you recognize this as the boy you saw trying to follow you out to visit with Nayra.
Okay.
Dr. Andrews, you would be so kind as to see if there's a slug or a worm in this boy. At the very least, that might alleviate my conscience some.
Yeah, I'll go examine him.
Okay, so a lot of damage was done to the chest cavity of this body. As far as the slug or the worm, the only encounter you've had with that was it trying to get out of the neck of that feral Karisuri that attacked you guys on your journey up here. So as you run your hands, over his body, looking for abnormalities, you do detect something moving in the stomach area of the corpse. Please give me a sanity roll. All right, so this motion underneath your hands is highly unnerving, and you lose 1d3 sanity.
Okay.
Our doctor is almost as crazy as our heavy hitter / guide.
So to confirm, for the rest of you watching Mr. Andrews, to confirm your suspicions, he jumps back and, emits an involuntary yelp at what he felt beneath the skin of this boy.
Could I grab a log from the fire and toss it onto the stomach?
I don't think the stomach's open yet. It's just in there.
Oh, then I'm going to say that we should pull him onto the fire.
I'd rather agree with that, but I think we might need to make a separate one. I don't know if I want this thing burning in the middle of camp.
I can make up a separate one. Just keep an eye on it, and I'll start moving some firewood over to about there.
Okay, and then you want to build, kind of a pyre like you did for the woman you guys gunned down when you were traveling up here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so you get that going, and you put his corpse on it, and it goes up after a little while. 1 sec. And who stays in proximity to watch the body burn?
I would.
I would too.
Just in case the worm crawls out.
Yeah, I'll have my 45 out at this point, though.
So yeah, the skin starts sizzling and fat starts popping, and when it gets fully engulfed, a portion of it detaches from the open body cavity and tries to escape the fire, but it too is aflame, and it only makes it a little ways off before it dies there burning, and you take this to be one of the larvae.
Yeah, I guess with that done, I'll head back and finish my supper.
Yeah.
Jackson asks each of you if you think there's going to be more of them.
I would imagine so.
Yeah.
'Cause hopefully we can finish our business here soon.
At this time, I'll bring up the fact that this one looked familiar to Jackson.
Yeah, I noticed it too, which makes me worry about the 4 that attacked us in Puno, the ones that got Nicholas.
That's what I was just thinking about as well. Dr. Andrews, you said that the 4 corpses that arrived shortly after our friend had disappeared, correct?
That's correct. I, at the time, thought someone had broke in and somehow made off with them, but now, as insane as it is to say, it seems more likely that they simply got up and left themselves.
And if this young man could make it all the way here from Puno, then it is very likely that the rest of them may not be far behind, if not already in the temple.
That's very true.
Just another reason to stay vigilant.
Okay, so the night draws to an end, and you guys, are you doing a similar watch as you did on the first night, or the exact same watch, I should say?
Yeah, at least 2 of us on watch.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how nervous we're feeling, we might bump that up to 3 in the next little while.
Okay, well, you do feel very nervous. In fact, I'll need a power roll from everybody.
Yeah. There goes that Stanton paranoia.
Yeah, Mr. Stanton, that's exactly what's occurring. There's nothing, it's just the whole situation feels like a net drawing in on you. And to make matters worse, the wind is picked up, and those the head carvings in the wall are doing their damnable howling, and it puts you on edge. And it actually disrupts your sleep that night, so that you don't feel fully refreshed in the morning. Now, is there anything anybody wanted to do during their watches before we continue?
I'll continue to look over some of the artifacts that we pulled out, especially some of the ones like that predate the Incan society that really shouldn't be here.
Yeah, right. I mean, it does fit that narrative that, some other party gathered these and brought them here. But in any case, the passes without event, and you guys get what rest you can, and for most of you, it's enough to take the fatigue out of the day's work before, except in the case of Mr. Stanton. And you kind of wake up with that pain in the small of your back and the beginnings of a headache from just not getting very good rest. But it's a new day, and you guys had planned to remove another of those capstones. Which of the capstones do you favor?
Do you guys want to go with this one since it should be right after that collapse? Or do you want to try and go here, which may be closer to that chamber?
Well, Keeper, now that I've been down in there and I know a little bit more about the underground layout, would that give me any indication on which one would be the better suited?
So this, well, let me ping it. This one you suspect is beyond the collapse if that tunnel continues on straight.
Okay.
The other ones might indicate that it branches out, or it's just a wider area. You're not quite sure. But they all look like they would put you somewhere beyond the collapse. You can actually look at the depression in the land just to the west of that the chimney you fell down, where it sank. You can actually see it's 3 or 4 yards where the earth sank a few feet. So it looks like all of those would be beyond the collapse.
Okay, I'll convey that.
There's enough room still to get like the mules back there and all that stuff to pull the cap off.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. All right, Mr. Monroe, your pick is as good as any.
Well, I think the one that's just past the collapse may be a good starting spot. We know that there won't be anything coming in behind us if we go down that one, because the collapse should have cut off any other direction.
Can only hope. So yeah, I'll start gathering up the mules and walking them over there.
Okay, using the same technique that James rigged up for you or yesterday, you guys get that cap removed. And again, there's an intake of air as more circulation is opened into the under parts of this pyramid. Now, are you guys going to use a similar method of getting down as you did on the last one?
Yeah.
Now, there is the matter of the where James had come up with that rapid sort of escape for at least one person. This is somewhat farther away from where you have Marco and Ray stationed, so they might not hear somebody, calling for help to get up.
Charles thought that was a like a ray of false hope, essentially. Anyway,
Okay.
that if we have a bunch of things behind us, that Marco and Ray could get to us in time. Mm-mm.
All right, so with the capstone removed, you drag your ropes back over there and start heading down again. So on the last chimney you all went down, I believe it went Mr. Stanton, Mr. Whitmire, then Andrews, or was it Monroe that came next?
Monroe and then me.
And then finally Jackson. So do we want to go with that same order?
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, one moment.
I do like this dynamic lighting thing that the Roll20's got going.
Always spooks me because I'm getting started in some corner, but I'm looking at the center of the map.
All right, Mr. Stanton, do you see where you came out in?
Yep.
Okay, so as you clamber out of the chimney exit where it comes out of the north wall there, and you look down both directions of this corridor, and again, this is a wide but short corridor, so they're about 10 feet wide, but the ceiling's only 4 feet above you. You're kind of in this half crouch position. When you look off to your right, you see old remains sort of slumped up against the wall. It's no more than 4 or 5 feet away from you. What do you want to do?
I'm going to keep an eye on that, but for the most part, till my companions get down here, it's kind of my job to cover their descent.
Right.
So I'm going to ready my rifle and just kind of hang out.
Okay, so in a minute or so, you hear James reach the end of that chimney and he clambers out, and then the rest after that. Let me get you all moved over. So there you all are, and looking off to the east, you see the other side of that collapse.
Do we see the Kari Siri that got caught in it, or any part of it?
Not from this side, but you do all see that, skeletal remains leaning up against the wall.
Does it have any clothing that's intact?
Tattered clothing.
I'll ask Mr. Monroe what he makes of it. Can you tell, I guess, what time period it's from
Keeper?
based on the clothing?
Oh yeah, you would estimate it's definitely not a fresh body. But other than there's nothing to indicate like a time period because the clothes are just too old and tattered. So it would take more
but we don't see
scientific
anything
testing.
but we don't see anything obvious like denim or something like that.
No, nothing modern.
Okay, yeah, I'll suggest that we leave it alone, just like we did the other corpses in the pit.
All right, Mr. Stanton, are you going to continue past it then?
Yeah.
As you approach right by it, though, give me a spot hidden.
From him or everybody?
Just him for now. Okay, so your lantern light picks up something gleaming, wet and gleaming in the open socket, the open eye socket of the skull.
Oh, it's one of them slugs is what I'm going to think. I see something gleaming out of its eye socket. I'll say that and point it out with my gun, kind of.
Yeah, when he holds his lantern up and points at the skeleton's right eye socket, you see this glimmering, and then you see it move sort of like the way a snake sort of coils together. It just sort of restricts back into the brain cavity of the skull.
Well, I don't think it'd be a good idea to fire a gun down here. Maybe use a flare to burn it out?
Excellent suggestion, Mr. Whitmire. I'll cover you.
All right. Yeah, I'll go up and light a flare and shove it into that eye socket.
Okay, so you put the flare into the eye socket, and you hear a squelching motion inside the skull, and then a white, waxy, fat-like substance bulge at the left eye socket, and then shoot out at you, and it actually lands on your shoulder. What do you want to do, James?
What options do I have?
Well, you could actually try to dodge, I suppose, before it landed on your shoulder. But as you see, it got an extreme success. So you would have to get a critical on either a dodge. You would have to get an extreme on your dodge roll or a critical on just like swiping it away from you.
I would imagine that first instinct would have been to try and get out of the way, which I didn't do.
Okay. Yeah, I think you... Oh, man, I can't remember. Fumbles 96 and up. All right. So, yeah, you narrowly avoided that. But, yeah, it's still on your shoulder, and that's what you see, Mr. Stanton, is one of these Cariceri larva launched out of the skull and landed on his shoulder. It's your move.
Well, unfortunately for Mr. Whitmire, I'm not good at brawling. Is there any sort of like aid another type of thing?
Yeah, you could do well just by you getting up there and trying to get at this thing. The two of you together will give each other a bonus die.
Okay. So yeah, I'll try to get up there and I guess help him by trying to knock it off his shoulder, I guess is what I'm doing.
Okay,
right?
yeah. Yeah, just go ahead and give me your fighting brawl skill roll.
Very low. Here we go. Oh, okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so no need to roll the bonus. I don't think it'll get any better than that. You knock it off the shoulder and it's on the ground now.
All right.
So Jackson's in the tail end, so he's kind of, trying to see what's going on. But that brings us to you, Dr. Andrews.
Throw your scalpels at it like ninja stars.
No, I'd like to try to slice it with my machete. That's probably the best option I have inside this narrow passageway. I don't want to shoot at it and maybe hit one of my companions.
Yeah, so you can brush between James and Mr. Stanton, and with your machete, you can attack it. I believe I need a fighting brawl roll with the machete.
Nice.
Yeah, so you bring your machete down and you cleave it in two segments. Although there still seems to be some reflexive action in the two separate parts as it squirms about and roils about on the floor. What do you want to do, Mr. Monroe?
Try not to scream like a little girl for one, and slowly back away from the entire scene while making room for anyone to get past me that wants to.
Okay, brings it back around to James.
I'll bring that torch or the flare to bear on it.
Okay, yeah, and you put it at the end of it, and it goes up, like grease, like fat, once you touch it for any amount of, for a longer amount of time. And you can do that to both halves.
And then I'll thank Mr. Stanton for his quick action.
Anytime, Mr. Whitmire.
Okay, so Stanton, you continue down this tunnel, and you can see it comes to a turn to the south, you think, if your directions aren't all mixed up. And just at the edge of your light, you can see the opening to another one of those chimneys coming out of the western wall. And
all right.
If it's possible, you had almost acclimated yourself to this smell yesterday, but you were assailed with it again when you came down here. And if it's possible, it seems to be getting worse as you peer down that southern leading passage.
Is this just a like old musty smell, or is it like a dead body smell?
Dead body.
Yeah, rancid meat.
Well, to help combat that, I'll light up a cigar, and I guess I'll offer one to anyone that wants one.
Yeah, I'll take one.
I won't, but I will wrap my handkerchief around my nose again.
And then I'll begin to cautiously continue on.
All right, so you travel down that southern leading passage for a little ways until it angles to the east again. And then what you see is what appears to be a pool of rancid fat. It looks to be about 10 feet wide, and it's covering that entire part of the passage ahead of you. The substance filling the pool is slowly oozing out of a 2-inch crack in the wall, where a section of, now as you round that corner, you see there's a band of gold inlay running along the northern wall. It's covered with limestone, and it's only by chance that you catch maybe a 1/4-inch glint of it in your lantern light. But yeah, there's a crack in that northern wall that this fat is oozing out of and pooling there in the passage. What would you like to do?
I guess I'll move up towards the edge of the fat and maybe toss a flare beyond it.
Maybe we should toss this one that I have lit into it and burn that stuff away.
I don't know how that would, I don't know if I know that might create a bunch of smoke, and I don't know if that'd be good down the tunnels.
So,
So
do we have somewhat of an understanding of where we are in relation to the pyramid? It seems like we basically nearly navigated around the back end of it, and now we're kind of on the southern side of it, but we're just kind of circling it in this tunnel.
So yeah, you are getting the sense that you're following an outer passage where the inner walls contain some chamber beyond. I mean, that's your guess at the construction of it. And when you come to this pool of fat, it seems to be the case because fat is leaking out of that inner wall. And Charles had pointed out a bit of the gold banding. Now, James and Mr. Monroe are much more familiar with what this banding represents. It is the exact match of the golden ward piece that Mr. Jackson has in his possession, or Mr. Elias has in his possession.
Do we see where it's missing on the wall?
Yes, it appears to be out of that 2-inch crack in the wall where the section where that fat's coming out of. Like that band just runs in the middle of the wall, and then you can see where it was crudely removed for, 2 or 3 feet, and then it continues beyond. As near as you can tell, much of it is covered with limestone deposits, and so it's, it's not glimmering, but that is your guess by looking at it.
Seems we found where this ward is. Whatever's inside must be using this point to come through.
And to further confirm everything, although this is an aside because it's only what Mr. Monroe is experiencing, is a deep sense of discomfort. Now, if you stay at the edge, the outer walls, you can feel that dark presence in your mind, but as you stray nearer to the inner wall, it starts to be stifled.
Okay.
So, do we go about patching the seal up?
As you ask that question, Mr. Stanton, you see that the surface is rippling. Not quite constantly, but frequently, as though something is below it.
Of the fat pool?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Mr. Jackson to pass that seal up to me.
So he takes a moment to remove it from his bag, and then he walks up and hands it to you.
All right, I'm going to, looking at this, is there any way that without getting into this fat pool that we could reach that crack?
You would have to build something to suspend yourself over the fat pool.
I'm going to experiment here just a little bit. I am going to put that ward towards the edge of that fat pool.
I'll give him kind of a warning. Careful, I think there's something down below the surface.
Okay. Nothing seems to happen. The ripples stop for a moment and then continue on. I do have a question for Mr. Monroe. How do you orient yourself? Do you risk the discomfort to darken the presence in your mind, or do you stay comfortable and on the edge of the outer wall?
I'll try and suffer the discomfort and stay closer to the inner wall, closer to the warding.
Okay.
Do we want to send a couple people back for material to reach this crack, Mr. Stanton?
I think that probably would be the best course of action.
Since they're already at the back, I'll ask if Mr. Elias and Mr. Monroe want to go and gather, wood and other materials that we could use to put over this fat pool.
Jackson is, of course, willing to do that.
I'm going to suggest that James go with him and keep a flare ready in case there's another worm.
Well, I'm asking if you two will both go. I'll go with you. That's fine. So I can hand the ward off to Stanton.
Monroe shouldn't go because he's injured, right? It should be me and Jackson.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. Sorry. Yeah.
That leaves Stanton and Whitmire.
Mr. Andrews and Elias. Then, if you want, I can go with you. As I was just thinking of who's near the back already.
Yeah, I think we can handle it.
Okay.
All right. So
I'll give you a flare though.
So, who was all going back to gather materials?
Elias, Jackson, and Mr. Andrews, I believe.
Okay. So, yeah, they head off back up the chimney to go gather that while you guys remain below. Okay, so from among those of you that are returning topside to gather materials, the way we'll do this is we'll leave this up to a luck roll from amongst the two PCs. Whoever's got the best luck roll.
For who?
For the topside crew. Is it just one player character going topside? Is it just
I thought it was me and Jackson.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's just up to you, Dr. Andrews. On a success, you're going to find, plenty of solid materials where he can build sort of a bridge to get out there. On a failure, you're going to have to lean more on like kind of a harness system where you guys will have to work in tandem to, I suppose, get somebody out there to repair that section of the warding.
Okay. Luck. No luck.
All right, so I will leave one option if you guys were willing to, use some of the harnessing and like stuff for the pack animals. You could still make that bridge. Of course, the trade-off would be less you could carry out on one of the mules.
Yeah, well, I won't do that because I don't truly understand how important it is to these guys. So
yeah,
it seems to me like I go up and I look and I'm going to go back down and say I really couldn't find anything that we could build a platform with. So maybe we should just move on.
But James, you have some idea of how you still might do it without, a bunch of solid material. So, but before we move on to attempting that, what I'm kind of interested in is that both James Whitmire and Lance Monroe have interacted with Father, and let's focus on Mr. Monroe. And your interactions with Father, he had an understanding that you were going to remove more of this warding or get help to do it or something to that effect. So what is going on in Mr. Monroe's head? You're kind of beginning to sweat, both from the heat and from the discomfort of standing close to this warding. But what are you thinking at this time?
Well, part of the reason that I'm pressing myself up against the warding and going through that discomfort is feeling that presence in the back of my mind at first made me think of trying to push Mr. Stanton into the flesh pool. And that idea bothered me so much that I had to try and repress any notion of Father. So that's why I'm pressed against the wall right now. And I really do plan on trying to replace the warding just because I've seen what Father's corruption does.
Okay. Yeah, and part of the discomfort, while it's mostly psychological, if you do just an experiment and bring your hand close to this band of warding, it actually is like bringing it close to a hot element. You get the sensation that you'll definitely do yourself physical injury if you manipulate the warding on your own. As far as Mr. Whitmire goes, in your interaction with Father, you had made an accord to remove this warding for wealth beyond your imaginings. And what is going on in the thoughts of Mr. Whitmire at this moment?
So, having had time to consider with with what I've already seen of this being's followers, how far does wealth go in a world that's completely dominated by one being? Secondly, I've already found that wealth as it's sitting up topside. So I don't really have any intention of honoring that agreement anymore.
Okay, so with the materials that Dr. Andrews brought back, which leave you unsatisfied, you still think you can rig something up to get out there and fix this thing without having to wade into the pool, but it's going to require a mechanical repair roll, and I believe you're the best one to do it, James. Although if others, want to throw it out there, that's fine as well.
So we just throwing this out there to see if we get it?
Yeah, I mean, that is part of how the system works.
It's the first one.
Nice.
You are a miracle today.
Thank you.
Chris is a miracle every day, Justin. What are you talking about?
But 3 extreme successes and a critical success, that's incredible.
It won't matter when I need to dodge or do something important to survive.
All right, so with that critical success you got there, Mr. Stanton, you're able to correct the course that Mr. Whitmire is going to take and make sure everything is going to hold up. And what this is going to resolve itself to be is you guys are going to have to harness somebody, and you'll get them out a little ways, and then they'll be able to lean out and then hopefully put that warding back into place. Before you do that, you'll have to hammer that section of the warding that you guys have flat, and then hopefully hammering it back into its original spot will do the intended thing. So what we need to decide, or what you guys need to decide, is who is the lucky individual to lean over the fat pool.
I'll do it.
Okay. All right, James. So, yeah, and it does make all of you guys, watching very nervous, but with that critical success, no additional rules are needed. And you flatten out that section of the warding, and you stick it into the depression where they had inlaid the warding around this wall, and you hammer it into place. And if this signified any change in what's beyond that inner wall or what's going on in the outside world, there's nothing happening to show it, besides the silence after the last ring of your hammer fall. What do you guys want to do?
Is there any change in that fat pool? Is it still rippling?
No. It stops after you do that. Or it seems to.
Well, without thinking about it, because if I did, I definitely wouldn't. I'm going to reach down into it now.
Okay. So you dip your hand into this rancid fat, and nothing happens other than it being an extraordinarily gross thing to do.
All right, and then I'll ask to be pulled back up.
I'm going to
Tell
ask
him
you
that
why.
I think it worked.
I'm going to ask, what were you thinking?
I had to be sure.
Now, Mr. Monroe, you still feel intensely uncomfortable around the ward.
Okay. For now, I'm still going to stay close to the ward until I kind of have to move away from it.
Okay. All right.
But knowing where we are, kind of guessing the path that we took around, do I think there may be a capstone on the other side of the fat pool that we can come down?
Yeah, you think so. In fact, you think the passage is continuing on, probably just circle around this inner wall. And, if the story of Akeko, luring a god down in here and then, trapping him down here. If it's not, technically correct, then you get the impression that that's what this inner wall is containing. So you're just looking at, if you continue on past it, there would be more of those chimneys, and then it would lead back to the collapse. So what do you guys want to do?
I want to clean my hand off.
I'll check my pocket watch and see what time it is.
Okay. So yeah, it's probably like 10:30
a.m.
in the a.m. in the morning, yeah.
So, Mr. Monroe, did you give voice to the idea that there was another capstone up ahead?
Yeah. I'll mention that based on where we stand now and the path we took, that the capstone on the southern side of the pyramid should lead us to just on the other side of this fat pool.
All right. Perhaps we should call it a day, see if everything is settled down here, if you get my drift, before we go popping off any more capstones.
I would agree with that. Last thing we want is we open up one of those and those 4 people try to attack us again, or this really didn't work. I would just suggest that you watch me for the rest of the night, though.
Given that we're leaving this tunnel, should we try and burn this off while we're outside, while we're no longer in here?
We could toss a flare into it and then, head back out if you want. What do you think, Mr. Stanton?
These flares burn down, right, Travis?
Yes.
Yeah. Wouldn't have to toss one in. Just leave it on the edge. It'll get there eventually.
Okay.
Did we seal off the leak with that?
The crack still seems to be there in the wall.
Okay.
Like you didn't correct the structure, and it's still dribbling. If it's if it's more or less coming out, you can't really tell.
But it slowed down the flow.
That's something you can't really tell.
Okay.
All right, so you're all going to head topside.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you rig up that flare on the edge of the fat pool. And once it burns down, it falls into it and sets it aflame.
We should have 2 flares that are burning right now, so I'd like to put both of them in there.
Okay. So you guys set those flares on the edge and you start to move away. And it's no sooner that you're away from this warding, Mr. Monroe, that the dark presence returns to your mind. And give me an extreme power roll.
I did not get the extreme.
So you begin to feel this presence, which most times occupies a small part of your psyche, start to grow. And with it, a sense of dread. And by the time you exit the chimney, you feel that it's about to overwhelm your very being. What do you do?
I'm going to tell Jackson to bind me, that something is happening with my mind.
Okay. So, he seems confused at first, but having grown accustomed to a lot of strangeness in recent days, he goes for some rope he has on him and begins to bind you. Now, the 3 of you ahead sort of turn around and see this exchange. What do you make of this, Charles? Mr. Monroe looks, very ragged around the edges.
Mr. Monroe, what seems to be the problem?
Something is wrong with my mental state right now, and I feel like it is probably for the best that I be restrained as best as possible. I don't know what's going to happen to me, but all precautions should be taken.
Good man. All right, let's get you back to camp. So Charles is figuring that he's hoping it will probably pass, and that it's more of Monroe's theatrics, but he's figuring that he might have to get ready to put Monroe down, and that whatever we sealed might not have worked, I guess, but he's not too knowledgeable on that stuff, so this is all kind of above his pay grade.
Okay. So you guys return to the camp, and for your part, Dr. Andrews, the way Mr. Monroe looks, you've seen patients that have had, total psychological breaks. Most recently, people that have come home from the Great War. But there are also, very stressful incidences in people's lives that have caused that as well. So it's very concerning to you.
All right. Yeah, so I want to go examine him then. And at the very least, I could probably give him a shot of, I don't know, whatever they had back then that makes people calm down. Tranquilizer of some sort.
Yeah, you could try to sedate him. You could even try to render him unconscious, although that is somewhat dangerous in this era. What are you looking? Which of those options do you prefer?
Euthanize him.
I just want to do an examination and see what's going on with him that physically that should concern me, like his heart rate and is he sweating more than he should or not sweating, that sort of thing, and then go from there.
Yeah,
Right.
his heart is racing. When you measure his pulse, it's going very fast. Enough that you worry about his physical health, and he is sweating. And when you look into his eyes, you see that the pupil seems to be bleeding out into the. What color of eyes does Lance have, Justin?
Probably brown.
Yeah, so the black of the pupil seems to be bleeding out into the brown irises in an irregular fashion, not as though his pupils are dilated, but as though, it's just bleeding out.
Yeah, so I've never seen anything like that before, but his heart rate is dangerous, so I will try to sedate him.
Okay, go ahead and give me a medicine roll.
So, Keeper, did I gain any hit points last night?
Yes, you gain 1 back. Okay, this does seem to have a good effect, at least on his pulse, although his eyes are still doing that disturbing thing. And, he seems to go into a more introspective and docile state as, he's been tied up. Jackson chose to tie him up in a more friendly fashion, so you're not, quite hog-tied, but he did tie your hands and feet, and he tied your hands and feet together, so it would be difficult for you to stand, Mr. Monroe.
Okay, probably for the best.
So for James and Mr. Stanton, as you're not directly concerned with Monroe, give me a listen roll. All right, James, you hear the irregular movement of somebody approaching down that path, and when you turn to look, you see a figure wearing a colorful poncho and a wide hat stumbling down the path. They seem to be in some distress. What do you do?
I'm gonna hop up with the that rifle and tell Mr. Stanton someone's coming.
Yeah, I'll hop up. Do I recognize the damn poncho?
Yeah, because you've seen many like it in Puno, and one of your attackers, when you guys in Puno were wearing it, if this is the same person, you can't determine for 100% sure, but the individual only takes a few steps before he collapses on his face on the path.
What do you make of that, Mr. Whitmire? Seems like a trap to me.
So, do I recognize this as well?
You recognize
Is it somebody that was attacked, that had attacked us?
No. He's saying the poncho's common. It's a
okay.
style.
Well, seeing as we're the only ones that have come here without an agenda to serve this being, I would assume that this is one of its agents and that the sealing is worked.
Perhaps. All right.
Or it's a trap, and when we get down there, it'll spring on us. But either way, I would say let's check it out.
All right, Mr. Whitmire, you're with me. I'll call out to Jackson and Dr. Andrews and let them know that I'm going to go investigate our new arrival.
Okay. So Stanton and Whitmire, you guys travel up that path to where the shape was, and as you get up to it, it seems to be a mummified corpse when you go to turn it over, and shrunken from the image that you saw when it was stumbling down the path, as though it had rapidly dwindled into a near skeletal corpse. Its mouth is bearing that Kari-Siri shape, but unlike the normal menacing opening, it looks as though it's a scream of agony.
Looks like you might have the right of it, Mr. Whitmire.
maybe we should dispatch it just to be safe. How many more flares do we have?
Give me a luck roll, Mr. Whitmire. You have one more flare.
I don't know if we should use this or not, but what do you think, Mr. Stanton?
I say we just drag it down to the other fire and put it alight. Hopefully whatever's inside burns up with it.
Okay. So I'll reach out and grab one arm.
Okay, so we'll pause with you guys and we'll go over to Mr. Monroe. So from your perspective, as this drug takes effect, your mental faculties turn entirely inward, and slowly you find yourself in the tenebrous place where you first met Father. And you feel that entity in the infinite space approach with terrible purpose, and his voice echoes out to you, and it's screaming with rage.
How dare you defy me? What excuse do you have for this insolence?
I made no agreement to serve you. I asked only questions.
You wanted to know the truth, didn't you? Wasn't that the agreement?
I wanted to know the truth, but I never made an agreement.
It doesn't matter. Your mortal agreements mean nothing. I can do it. I can make you do it if I want to. Should I?
I will fight you every step of the way. I will not serve you willingly.
All right, so this invisible force in this infinite space starts to crowd in around you one moment, and it threatens to push out the core of you from your body. Again, Mr. Monroe, give me an extreme power roll.
I don't suppose I could luck that.
You could.
I will.
All right.
I need to get it down to a 9, right?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, I'll luck it.
Okay, this entity, as it was closing down on you, you felt like a man standing in the face of an avalanche with about as much hope of stopping it. But by some inner force of will and a little luck, you hold back the tide of this entity as it washes over you, and you rebuff its attempts to take control of you, and you feel it flee into the infinite space with a wail of rage. And for your part, Dr. Andrews, as you're observing Mr. Monroe, you see that his pupils go back to a natural state, although somewhat dilated by the sedatives.
Okay. So I'll monitor his other vital signs and see what happens with those too.
Yeah, his heart rate seems to calm even more so. About what you expect somebody's heart rate to be when you sedate them. Everything seems to be normal as far as that goes. And it's at that point that James and Charles drag this corpse back into the site. And as you're dragging it, it seems to be deteriorating even further. Like, James, you have one of its legs and it detaches at the hip just before you get it under the gate, so that you're just holding a leg in your hands.
All right, I'll give it like a disgusted, like, ugh, and toss it away, and tell Mr. Stanton that maybe we don't need to burn this one.
Another good omen. Let's share our new bit of knowledge with our friends, or with our colleagues.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and any further examination of that, it just is rapidly reducing to dust, and in not a long amount of time, all you have is clothes filled with grave dust.
I would like to tell Mr. Andrews about it. It might be of some interest to him. Yeah, that we found one of those mummified Karisiri is what was coming up the path there, but it seems to be degrading at an alarming rate. I'm not sure if you wanted to examine it before it becomes nothing.
So yeah, Mr. or Dr. Andrews, you can, when they first bring it in there, you can still make out the telltale Karisiri mouth.
But then it all turns to dust.
Yeah, in the space of 30 minutes, at the end of those 30 minutes, there's nothing more than dust to show any evidence of a corpse.
Okay.
How much dynamite do you think it would take to bring down that other entryway, Mr. Stanton, and do you think that it would disrupt disrupt that ward?
Well, right now, this thing being sealed up seems to be having the best route for us to go back down there and hopefully find whatever artifacts Mr. Merriweather wished us to acquire. So I'm, for the time being, against sealing up any more of the vents that would lead into the actual temple proper.
I was thinking more of on our way out, as whatever this thing is, I don't think that I would want it released afterwards.
I absolutely agree with you. Unfortunately, it's not my call as to whether or not to release it. Us sealing it that's a temporary thing. Mr. Merriweather wishes to unleash it. I leave that up to him.
For your part, Mr. Monroe, you are sedated now, but you can observe everything that's going on. You're just somewhat detached from it, so you're not barred from interacting in the conversation at all.
Okay. I'll speak to Jackson and say the problem seems to have passed for now. If you could untie me, then I believe I am feeling a lot more like myself.
And yes, even though your mind feels muddled by the drug, you do not feel a dark presence there any longer.
I'm assuming I lost the power too.
Maybe you'll have to
I'd
try
probably
it.
have to try it.
Okay. So yeah, you guys are, I suppose it would be about lunchtime. For Jackson's part, he's curious what else we're going to find down there. We have more gold to carry, and it seems that Mr. Merriweather has left it up to you guys to determine what fulfills the mission. I mean, I guess I don't really know what it was he was looking for, but it seems we've found everything.
Unfortunately, I don't think Mr. Merriweather knew what he was looking for as well. We'll give the place once more over, and then if we can't find anything else, we'll leave this cursed plot of land. If he feels that we missed something, he can send another party to come excavate. I won't come here again.
Okay, and for this once over, will all of you be going down there again?
I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I should also mention that from one of those chimneys, you see thick black smoke pouring out of it, for the better part of an hour. The one that you had all your ropes going down, but eventually it subsides.
From the pool of fat we set on fire?
Right.
Does anybody want to see what's at the bottom of that pool?
Yeah, I feel no reason to pull off another cap if that fat puddle's mostly burned up, hopefully.
I think that with what Mr. Monroe was saying, that was just an outer wall. The other cap that we pull off would be to actually enter the inner part of the pyramid.
Okay.
No, I believe that the way that it was described is that the capstones lead down to that kind of pathway that goes around the outside of an inner chamber. And so if we pull off another capstone, we would just end up on the same path, just on the other side of that fat pool.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, when you guys make your way back down there, the odor, in your estimation, is much improved because rather than smelling like rancid meat, it just smells, like smoke. Excuse me. It smells like smoke, which sort of conceals how bad it smelled previously. But you can see it burned off that entire pool. And what's left behind is just a depression where the liquid was filling it, and there seems to be nothing of interest found in the bottom. But it does allow you to continue on past that point if you so desire.
So once we get back close to the warding, do I get that uncomfortable feeling?
No. Well, the call is yours, Mr. Stanton. Will you press onward?
Yeah. Yep.
So it starts to wind around this inner wall, and you come to another one of those chimney openings in the southern wall. And again, to what you calculate to be the final one of the chimneys there. And then finally circling around to where the collapse has blocked off any further progress.
All right. Looks like we've come as far as we can. Perhaps we should go to the treasure that was piled up and give it one last comb over, make sure that all the artifacts are removed, and then leave this place.
Sounds good.
Out of the entire outside passageway, there was only that one section that had the warding on it.
No, it
The rest of the warding was covered by the limestone.
Yes, in much of the wall it was covered and you couldn't see it, but you did see bits of it. Let me move you back to where you saw bits of it. So you saw bits of it on the western wall there.
Okay, and we never saw anything that resembled the mask, right?
No. Well, I mean, you've seen the mask was done in the style of pre-Incan empires. Why it was imbued with a power is beyond your ability to grasp when others are not.
Okay.
So yeah, you can combing over the remaining artifacts. It's Monroe's done a very good job of choosing what he thinks are the best. It is, after all, a big part of what he does is curate for a museum. So he's able to make fine selections, and you have more than enough to carry back. However, Mr. Monroe, that ward does contain the Aklo script. And so you know that if you return without parts of it, that would be something that Mr. Merriweather would have been interested in, according to his letter. Of course, you've known him to be a reasonable man, and if you were to lay out the events as they had happened, he would probably side with your guys' decision, but I am just putting that into your mind.
Okay.
You want to tear it out?
No.
Let's do it.
Hey, this is what we're here for.
But I do want to try looking in that mask again.
Okay.
Hesitantly, but...
All right.
I'm sorry, but that's hidden away.
Okay, so yeah, we'll just, after your examination and one last look over the pile of gold, you are packing things onto the mules to make sure you can carry as much back as you can, although you figure, Charles, that it's safer to stay one more night here rather than risk, a partial journey in the steeper parts of this land.
Yeah.
At what point do you want to look in the mask again, Monroe? Although I think, weren't you holding it close, James?
Yeah, I am hiding that away upon my person, usually.
But yeah, I'll come to him and ask him if the mask has lost its power as well.
I'll say yes.
And I'll say, may I see it one last time, and then you may keep it. I have no objections. The warding seems to have done what it needed to protect us from Father.
Would you really put yourself at risk like that again?
I feel I must. We have sealed one way that Father has entered our realm. I would like to at least know if there is perhaps a second path that he may take.
Do we have all the tents set up and everything still?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'll usher him into the tent.
Okay, Mr. Monroe, it's probably with some anxiety about your actions that you begin to peer into the mirrored surface of this mask again. Please give me a power roll, and then roll 1d7 for me twice. Okay, so, with some mounting horror, you begin to see a vision again, and I can't remember if you've gotten this one already. It was thousands of people, men and women of every race, atop a great mountain, and they're performing bloody and orgiastic rites. Orgiastic in the sense of the excess of the bloodletting that's going on. And then that vision subsides, and you see another one. This is of a dark space, but the only light you can see appears to be illuminating a stained glass window, though you're inside of a structure looking out of it. And the images are in the stained glass window are not the Christian sort of symbols you're used to seeing in those things, but horrific alien vistas that you begin to pick out details of only moments before the image disappears. So give me a sanity roll. You might actually be immune to this by now, I'm not sure.
I think the one that was immune to it.
Yeah, I hadn't looked into it quite as many times.
Okay, so you lose 1d3 sanity. Mr. Whitmire, as you're watching Monroe look into this, you see the glazed expression come over his face, and that sort of sends a jolt of adrenaline through your body as well, knowing that if you restored this ward, it might have done something to the Kari Siri, but the magic within this mask still seems to be intact. What do you guys want to do?
Well, I'll take that back and store it on my person again.
And I'll tell him to be careful, that it obviously still is a passage to Father, and Father nearly destroyed me when I refused him. I don't know what he may do to you in your betrayal as well. You were the one that restored the wards. But in our passage home, I would like to chronicle all of the things that you have seen in the visage of the mask, all of the visions and times and places you have seen, so that I can merge them with my own and take them to Mr. Merriweather as a full accounting.
That I'd be happy to tell you what I'd seen, but rest assured is that this is one item that will be staying with me after our trip.
I'm sure that you'll keep it close, but my greater fear is how close you will keep it. Remember, it is not something to be trifled with. I have no doubt that I very nearly was destroyed mind and soul in my last encounter with Father not too long ago.
Oh, you said it yourself, as I was the one who destroyed the ward. Do you really think I'd be so foolish as to look into this again?
Well, I am sure that your trepidation will give you some caution. Sometimes the lust for power can overwhelm a man's better judgment. I just hope that you keep that in mind as you go forward.
I have enough gold to save any man.
But I said power, not gold.
Power and money are the same side, or the opposite side of the same coin.
That the gold is power is nothing but an illusion that people continue to tell themselves.
But if it buys me everything that I want, including power over other people, then it is power.
But that power only goes as far as people are willing to go for the gold.
As we know, people are willing to go great lengths for gold or any money.
They are. Well, I will leave it at that. I have made my warning, and I hope you consider it and keep it close to your thoughts, and keep that mask well away from anyone that would do harm with it.
I will. So as he's leaving, I will laugh maniacally to myself and then put the mask on. Just plain. I'm not going to put the mask on.
All right, so, the night has approached and another restless watch is in your future, but there's someone's mind I think we'd like to peer into, and that's Mr. Charles Stanton, as you were tasked with sort of knowing everybody's individual purpose. Which, if any of the items that you are aware of that you guys have come in contact with, do you think that Monroe has identified as something to go back to Mr. Rupert Merriweather? And if you have any items in mind, what is it that you plan to do about it?
I forget. I think I know of the mask, right? And then there was the seal, which is kind of lost to us. Though I was going to suggest that maybe Monroe could do a rubbing of the completed seal, so we could kind of take that back to Mr. Merriweather.
That's totally doable.
I guess if I was going for the mask, I'm probably going to try to bribe people to take Mr. Whitmire's stash, like whatchamacallit, like custom agents. So
Okay.
when we're doing a border crossing, but I don't know if Stanton would be able to arrange that ahead of time.
Okay, I see. So with the expedition to this site in the Andean highlands coming to an end, you leave on that final day at the pyramid, glancing back as you snake your way up the path of the mountain. And the pyramid, like all old structures, looks empty, but full at the same time. And in your group are among the few who knows what actually may lie inside that structure. And much like the pyramid, as this narrative comes to a close, the life seems to leave it as well. And we see a montage of, images of you guys traveling back across the highlands and through Puno and securing passage to Lima, and then awaiting a ship back to the various parts that you return to. With the exception of Dr. Andrews, though, Mr. Merriweather is awaiting your guys' report in person, and when you guys make your way to Miskatonic University to meet with him, he listens to your various accounts with the attention that you all have grown to like in him, depending on what all you guys say. There's nothing that seems to baffle him, and he seems to take every word that you say at face value. And he does not question the decisions that you guys made on this journey. It seems his confidence in choosing you gives him full confidence in your ability to make decisions on his behalf. At no point do you see disappointment cross his face if none of the treasure that was brought back meets the criteria he laid out, and he congratulates you. And the only emotion you see on his face is sadness at Nicholas's fate. Beyond that, Jackson Elias, at some point down the road, sends you guys a working manuscript without a title. He sends each of you a copy, and it's an account of the expedition, although the more alarming things that actually happen were left out of it. And he allows, without lying outright, the reader to believe that it was just an ordinary human cult at the root of all of this. And for those of you that would return the favor, Jackson Elias proves to be a bit of a letter writer, and you each receive a letter shortly after you return to your homes or wherever you go. And if you respond, he will keep up a correspondence with you going forward. Which among you would do that?
I will.
I would happily.
With Jackson, you said?
Yeah.
Absolutely. He was my favorite one.
Well, yeah, and like many writers, he has sort of a sardonic wit that comes out in his style of writing that's somewhat lessened when he speaks. He was much more introspective of a person than he is a writer. But yeah, so you guys return to your lives, so we'll pass it around and get sort of an end cap from each of you. But before we do that, there's going to need to be one last group luck roll, and I believe Mr. Monroe is still sitting there with the lowest luck.
By far.
All right, go ahead and throw that out there. And what was your question, Brandon?
If we could use the highest luck roll rather than the lowest.
Well, that defeats the fun of the group luck. All right.
Okay, well, I wasn't really part of his group. I mean, him and I, we didn't know each other that well.
That's true.
In fact, I was sort of separate the whole time. Just kidding.
All right, so let's start with, what does Charles Stanton do when he returns to wherever he returns to?
A return to normalcy for Charles, it basically means a quick stop off at his home in Morocco, a week or so, no more. Then it's back to work, leading wealthy men into the darkest of jungles to hunt the most fearsome of predators and guiding would-be explorers into the forgotten places of the world.
All right, more opportunities to chip away at that sanity.
Yep, gotta keep it going.
And what does the good Dr. Andrews do at the end of this expedition?
Right, so Dr. Andrews, I go back to Puno, and it takes not long at all before I realize that it's not really home for me anymore, because I had set out on this expedition to find, an answer to who was killing these locals and mummifying them. And so through the course of this, what turned out for him to be a 5-day expedition, he'd been keeping a journal, which is actually in the form of a letter to his sister, who's institutionalized back in Massachusetts. And he expresses that after seeing what he's seen, he can't just go back to being a regular doctor in a sleepy South American town. So he's already a wealthy guy, and so his intentions is to go back to the United States, back home, where he will most likely begin delving into this sort of knowledge. Probably he'll go back to university because he can afford it, and study something like archaeology or mythology or something along those lines, and keep an eye out for opportunities to go on these sorts of expeditions in the future. And he also will probably see if he can join the Society for Explaining Stuff that nobody knows how to explain, or whatever it's called. SIEU, right?
SEU, yeah, and I'm sure Lance or James would extend an invitation to that society if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so that's what he'll do.
All right, Mr. Monroe, you probably being the most affected from this journey through your experiences, how is your return to the States treat you?
Well, I guess on the way back through Puna, I would have tried to stop and see Nera to let her know that the god had been sealed again and that the Kari Siri would no longer be bothering her, only to find out that she had been murdered by the Kari Siri. Then once I get back to the United States, having my correspondence with Jackson to keep up on where he is, and of course letting him know that if he is going on any more investigations of blood cults and ancient cultures, that I would be more than happy to be a companion with him. But more than that, I believe I would be trying to stay a little bit closer to Mr. Merriweather. His interest in the temple and some of the other things concern me a little bit, but more than that, it gives a chance for me to be closer to a source of information on the occult that I hadn't had before. And in my spare time, delving as deep into my grandfather's journals as I can, maybe trying to piece out a location of where he had begun to lose his sanity.
Okay. All right. And you did bring a thought to my mind that was more concerned with Andrew's after experience, and that's the murders in Puno cease, or at least the type that you had seen for the remainder of your duration there.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us finally to Mr. Whitmire, who is in possession of the Golden Mask. How does your return to the States find you?
So, upon the return and collecting monies from Mr. Merriweather, I am going to, or Mr. Whitmire is going to spend some time fencing some of the items that he returned with. And once he has amassed what he feels is enough wealth, he's going to try and recruit and, in some cases, purchase the loyalty of some of the most unscrupulous people you could know, and try and take a violent takeover of the New York underworld.
All right. And that
Nice.
is where the narrative, at least as far as the player's perspective, comes to an end, although we do have an epilogue here that is just for the benefit of the players who controlled these investigators. So our lens will first focus on the garage of Mr. Merriweather's sizable estate, in which Mr. Merriweather stands in the garage looking at a casket. He's sort of rubbing his chin and musing at it, and he speaks up. Mr. McCracken, if I might bother you for a moment, do you think you could pry this casket open for me? And then a large, red-haired, red-bearded man comes out with sloped shoulders and gigantic hands, with a crowbar seeming like a child's toy in his hands, and he pries open the end of the casket. And inside is the well-preserved body of Nicholas Saucedo. And Mr. Merriweather looks upon this corpse with true and apparent sadness. "Oh, my dear boy," he says, and he stands beside the corpse, and he reaches into his coat, drawing out some sort of container that when he opens, it stores inside it a silverish powder. And he dips his finger in the powder, and using this substance, he draws a curious symbol on the naked forehead, the scarred forehead of Mr. Saucedo. It's a strange, five-pointed star where the angles don't seem to match up right, with some strange symbol in the center. And finally, Mr. Merriweather says, "Sleep well, my dear boy, but not for long, I hope." And he motions to Mr. McCracken to close the casket up. Now our lens zooms to another spot, another place. This looks like a cafe in Paris. And a man walks in the door wearing a linen suit, and he's almost skeletal. And he sits down at a table where other men are gathered, and they're hard-looking men, rough sorts, used to being in the outdoors. And he sits down at the table, and he says, "Gentlemen, let's get down to business, shall we?" And he speaks with an accent that sounds like he comes from Kenya. And that is where we will end this season of Death Watch's Call of Cthulhu Campaign. Thank you guys for playing.
Thanks for
you very much.
being the keeper.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we'll see you guys next season. This has been a Death Watch production. Thank you for listening.